about to get crazy. It's about to go down.
This is Idaho Sports Talk with Prater and the Ballgame.
It's about to get crazy. It's gonna be loud. This is our house. We do what we wanna. We'll pull the roof. Everybody's coming. It's about to get crazy.
On Sports Radio 95.3 FM and 1350 AM, The Ticket.
All right, hour number 3 on what is the eve of Boise State's Fall Camp 2023. Yes, tomorrow they put the pads on, they hit the practice field. It becomes official. The 2023 football season is now here, Boise State fans. We're obviously pumped about it here on Prater in the Ballgame. So much so that we're going to dedicate the next couple segments, Prater, roughly a half hour of lovely sports radio consumption to Boise State camp. We'll share our priorities, what we think they should be at a fall camp, and Andy Avalos will share you some of his training camp priorities when we come back with him coming up later this hour. Stuff he said, of course, in his press conference yesterday. Welcome our video streaming audience. Thank you to the Dollar Loan Center. Go to don'tbebroke.com, Prater, and let's have some fun. BSU priorities for fall camp.
Not many of them. Now, with that said, I'm sure Andy Avalos feels a little bit different about that. I'm sure he's got a whole bunch of priorities. And as you said, you're going to hear from him at 4 or 5:15 about what his priorities are. I think this football team is in pretty good shape. And on the outside looking in, we only have a limited information until we get to start showing up at camp tomorrow. But my priorities are all on paper. My priorities are all as an outsider with this football team. I've got 4 big priorities with this football team that need to happen over fall camp. Again, Andy Avalos' list is a little bit different. I went straight different from him. His first two are very different, but very football eccentric. So let's get after this. We'll put yours together. We'll put mine together. We'll put Andy Avalos' together, and all of a sudden we have an agenda for Boise State football camp.
Yeah, I like where this team is too, Prater. I think this is going to be another exciting season of Bronco football for Boise State fan. I don't know what that means for wins, losses, championships, what that comes into play, but I think this program is in a nice position to have a really good year and to win this league, something they haven't done since 2019. And who knows, maybe Prater knock on a door for a New Year's Six type of bowl game. I feel like it's been a few years since they've even been in that conversation. And that's been the conversation that this program, this fan base has wanted to be in since 2006 around here in Boise, Idaho. They want to go to the highest level bowl that they can. For me, the number one priority at camp, Prater, you got to get out of this thing healthy. You got to go into Washington full speed ahead, all hands on deck. The best ability being the availability of this team getting ready for Washington. This fan base does not want to hear, such and such tweaked a hamstring. Such and such pulled a groin muscle. Something's wrong with that guy's knee. He's a status in question. Who knows what we'll even hear from these injuries. But for me, Prater, health, that's kind of the no-brainer, I think.
Yeah, that goes without saying, and it's not going to happen. They're going to get some injuries, and that's why Andy Avalos has spent this entire offseason talking about his favorite word, depth. Last year during the season itself, it was dependable depth. He thinks he's done. He's very proud of the depth that he's built on this football team. He thinks he's got depth in the trenches on the offensive side and on the defensive side. So, yeah, when those injuries do happen, because they always do happen in fall camp, to your point, they need to come out of fall camp as healthy as possible. But
yeah,
if it happens on the defensive line, happens on the offensive line, then that's again, Andy Avalos has his security blanket based on what he said this offseason. My first priority is already a byproduct of that. Camp hasn't even started yet, and Andy Avalos, as you guys know, stood up behind the podium yesterday and said the leading wide receiver is gone. So now Boise State, for me, one of the priorities is, and again, I left a couple that Andy Avalos is going to talk about at 5:15 off the list. So this may not be number one, the most important thing, but for me, I think Boise State needs to find a 5th wide receiver because everybody moves up now that Caples is gone. Cobbs, Bowens, McAllister, and Prince Strawn all move up. You say the 5th wide receiver, Prater. If our season depends on the 5th wide receiver, then we're in trouble. Well, last year's 5th wide receiver was Eric McAllister, and he caught 11 passes for 259 yards and 4 touchdowns and emerged as one of the big threats for the playmakers this year on this team. So the fifth wide receiver under Taylor Green, where they're going to pass the ball more, to me has a big emphasis. They need 5 wide receivers. They always play with 5 wide receivers. Last year, they had a couple of tight ends. This year, they only have 1 dependable tight end. So I think that fifth wide receiver, not replacing Latrell Caples, that's not going to happen, but finding a Whiting or a Penry or a Wright, one of those 3 needs to stand up and become the fifth wide receiver for Boise State, and it has to happen sometime during fall camp.
I'm going to say, too, that's interesting to think that McAllister was that fifth receiver last year, and those 4 touchdowns were big, and obviously Bronco Nation wants him to have a big-time year, too. We don't know who, in fact, that will be. Maybe a couple of local kids will get in the mix, and Ben Ford and Austin Bull.
They're going to miss the first 2 weeks of camp.
They are. Yeah,
so they're not going to be ready for the first month of the season. If they're going to be ready, they're going to be ready in the second half of the season.
Yep.
So you cannot count on Bolt and Ford early on, especially with those tough 5 non-con games. So
but that's where they counted with McAllister last year, too. He was kind of more of a second half
Correct.
of the year
Yep,
guy,
absolutely.
too. But certainly in training camp, it'll be harder, and that's what starts tomorrow, fall camp. Confidence, I want to know where the confidence level is, and I think it's up to the staff and the practices and what they do to instill the confidence in this team going into into Seattle, or breaking camp, being ready to go to Seattle and win and start 1-0. This team, it felt like this program back in the day, and I wasn't at practices or certainly in the locker room, but it felt Chris Peterson was able to instill this confidence in this team. Didn't matter the opponent. And Boise State would always get in that big-time week 1 tussle against a big-time team with a high ranking and a big stadium, that type of deal, whether it be Oregon, Virginia Tech, Georgia. You can go on and on with those games. And it felt like they went in there, and you could see it right from the first snap. They had confidence. They felt like they were going to win. I want to see that established through training camp too. And I don't know how Andy Avalos and his staff does that, but I think a confident group, Prater. And the cool thing that we keep hearing Andy say on this is how much he likes this team, how much this team likes this team. Hopefully that will breathe some confidence into this thing. And then they finish this fall camp when they do, ready to go and really get after it this season, man.
My number 2 priority is the center position, and the offensive line I think is going to be much better this year. There's no doubt about that, but I'm talking about the outsides, and I'm talking about the guards, and a little bit of the depth I think got better. My biggest concern is the center position. And we told you guys yesterday that Boise State has 4 centers on its roster. Not a single one of them have taken a college snap. We came out of spring ball. Everybody thought that Nathan Cardona, including the coaches, that's what they kept telling us. Nathan Cardona, he was going to be your stud center. And all of a sudden, he's now number 2, which is a good sign for the depth. And Mason Randolph is going to jump in. Mason Randolph did a nice job with Boise State in limited opportunities last year. So they like him a lot at the center position. Steele is there as well, including and this new kid, Bujnowski. He was with the team last year. He's a redshirt sophomore out of Virginia Tech, a transfer from there. So those are the 4 centers. None of them have played a single snap of college football. And that, to me, if the weak link there is the center position, then I'm really concerned, especially early on. Guys, I'm gonna scare you for a second. How many times have you cringed over the last 5 years looking at bad snaps, right snaps, left snaps, over the head snaps, Hank Bachmeier running for his life snaps? It's been an issue at Boise State with dependable centers. And now you have people that have never snapped a football in your life, 4 of them, and that's a big concern to me. Going into Washington, where you're going to have a silent snap count, that's going to be very, very delicate and very, very tricky. So if the center position doesn't get its act together this month, then I think the offensive line takes a big hit, and they can't afford to do that.
I'm going to go with the pass rush, and I think there's a lot of things you can mask on a football team, maybe a weakness. Unfortunately, up front defensively, that is not something you can hide, and you certainly can't hide it against a top 10 opponent. Boise State this fall, this camp, a priority must be on, I don't want to just say the front 7. I'll just go with the front 4. Whatever they're going to find, the rotation will be. And I know, Andy spoke highly of Herbert Gums yesterday. Said Gums has played a lot of football. He's ready for this. But I've never seen Herbert Gums. I've never noticed him stand out on an all-conference type of level. I've never seen Herbert Gums take over a game. I've never seen those type of plays. We saw Scott Matlock do that, and we're expecting Herbert Gums to have somewhat of a kind of a Scott Matlock type of season. Ahmed Hassanin. This is the third year now we've heard that they really like him. And this is the third year we've heard, well, he's not from here. Exchange student, new to the game of football. So each and every year is massive for him, learning in the classroom and then translating that onto the field. I think he's going to be into the mix. Demetri Washington, we've talked about this all stinking off season. Here's the guy that, can he have more than 4.5 sacks for his career high? Can he be a 9-sack guy? Is there an 8 to 10 sack player on this team? And does that even matter if you can collectively get the pressure on the quarterback? My fear, if I'm Andy Avalos, and big priority going into fall camp, which starts tomorrow, is, Prater, I can't get smoked up front this year with this team, because if that's the case, it's really hard to put the pieces in around if you're weak up the middle in this thing.
My third and final priority for fall camp, and Bob did a beautiful job at Bronco Focus. I just posted the Bronco Focus segment at KTIK.com and on our app. It's there for you to listen. Mario Warren does a beautiful job of breaking down the cornerback position, breaking down the difference between the two cornerback positions, and breaking down the depth chart. And there are 4 players on this depth chart who could become instant starters, and 2 more who could become pretty quality backups. So that gives you 6 cornerbacks in a room where you only need 2 starters. They're going to rotate between Clark, McCoy, Reed, and Kaniho. I don't know who's going to start, who's not going to start. I don't think it really matters. It's like the wide receiver. You're in a formation out there, and you could have 1, 2, 3, 4 wide receivers. It doesn't matter who's going to start. It doesn't matter who's going to start at cornerback. It's just a matter of they have 4 dependable ones. And Boise State they're brutal. I mean, they're absolutely just mean to cornerbacks. They put them out there by themselves. They put them out there on islands. They don't give them a lot of love. They even joked about this in the press conference yesterday. Just go over there and do your damn job and leave me alone. That's what they want from their cornerbacks. There's good experience. There's also some experience that's been very injury prone. Interceptions, the lack of interceptions have always been a concern to me. So I need some more playmakers back there, but the cornerback position and how it develops, and we might not even see the fruits of those labors until they line up play 1 against Washington.
Oh, yeah. Good point, Prater. It's Andy Avalos' thing. What are his priorities? Let's get back to that press conference yesterday on Prater and the Ball Game. Andy Avalos, when we come up, and again, our video segment brought to you by the Dollar Loan Center, funding loans for 25 years at don'tbebroke.com. We're quick, inexpensive, safe, regulated, and thrilled to be opening. How about this? 16 locations soon in Idaho. Apply online for a $5,000 rebate at don'tbebroke.com for a limited time. Your first loan is even free. That's don'tbebroke.com. Prater, let's get to Andy Avalos. Training camp, fall camp priorities. What are his? Prater in the Ball Game, Idaho Sports Talk, KTIK, The Ticket.
From the Beacon Plumbing Traffic Studio.